This is George Fishman, producer and host of The Mosaic of Art. Charles Steinbeck is the curator of photography at the Norton Museum of Art in West Palm Beach, Florida. Norton.org is their website. One of the Mosaic of Art's missions is to find out what really goes on in the daily lives of arts professionals. I asked Charlie to describe what he had been involved with before our interview.
This was probably a more glamorous day than usual. I was in the midst of trying to make the final selection for an exhibition that we're opening in March entitled A to Z, which is an exhibition of 26 great photographs from the Norton collection, starting with Ansel Adams and ending with a photographer named George Zimble. And there's a lot to deal with in terms of wall text and curatorial text and invitation design. It seems like constant little details, but that's what we sort of embrace at the museum, worrying about all these little details. Typically, a museum planning period is up to 2 years, if not longer. The hard work starts happening about a year out. 6 months ahead of time, we're dealing with all sorts of issues, from presentation to loans for borrowing works from other institutions. The last 2 weeks are the funnest part, because we're actually in the gallery with the artworks and sometimes with the artist actually installing the show. So after working on something for a year or two, we have maybe 2 weeks to play and enjoy it, and then there's the opening, and then we start the next project.
2 exhibitions were just getting underway at the Norton when I spoke with Charlie Steinbeck. The first, called Now What, was quickly curated from work reviewed by curators Cheryl Brutvan and Charlie Steinbeck at Art Basel Miami Beach and other associated shows in the Miami area during early December 2010. The other show, a photo show, is called Stare. I was interested to learn whether these 2 shows reflected anything new in the orientation of the Norton toward contemporary art and photography now that their new director had been in her position for a few months and a new set of galleries had been inaugurated. What does this say, Charlie, about a shift in the Norton's focus and priorities?
Well, I don't think it's really a shift per se, but I think the arrival of Hope Alswing, our new executive director, she realized that photography and especially contemporary art were really on the minds of a lot of people, and something that we had been addressing throughout the last decade with some really important and significant exhibitions, but she wanted to make it even more prominent. Mm-hmm. The inauguration of those gallery spaces for photography and contemporary art was just one way of her saying, I take this seriously. The institution is going to be, let's say, more aggressive in organizing and presenting exhibitions of this type. But also we're going to be trying to collect more work of this type. When you look at the history of the Norton Museum and Ralph Norton, his collecting philosophy in the 20s, 30s, and 40s until he built the museum and left the works to start the museum, he basically was collecting contemporary artists. So following in that tradition, we want to really embrace Ralph Norton's sort of daring acquisitions of about 70 years ago and make sure that we're addressing the art of the moment. And the other dilemma with collecting contemporary art is no one knows. No one knows what the long view of history will do to certain work. There are probably countless artists in the 19th century that were selling their paintings for thousands, but when Van Gogh died, he'd only sold 1 painting during his lifetime. Again, doing a show like Now What, it is this sort of bold jump for a museum, and a bold jump because museums work months, if not years, in advance. This show, from the starting of the curatorial process to the opening, was about 10 days, which some of my colleagues basically asked me if I was crazy. But it was a fun exercise, and you've seen the show and other people, it's really an exciting exhibition.
Absolutely. What was the germination? Give us a hint of what the process was like, please.
Well, the germination, we were having a meeting about something, and I made the comment that Art Basel was 8 months away or 9 months away, and we have half the contemporary art world at our doorstep with tens of thousands of artwork. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could organize an exhibition from all of that? Hope Allswing really loved the idea and said, okay, make it happen. That was the beginning. And so we knew we had 5 days, and we knew we had about 16 to 18 fairs to go through, but we really didn't know how we were going to tackle it. We started December 1st at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, and we just started walking. The one thing that we said is that we wanted it to be not sort of a top 40. We wanted it to be an exhibition where there was a thematic connection between the artwork, so it made a more significant curatorial statement. And within a few hours, we started realizing there was certain works that each of us were drawn to that really started to sort of become a significant idea for the exhibition.
I asked what the common theme was that united the artworks that especially appealed to both Charlie Steinbeck and Cheryl Brutvan among the many they were looking at together.
People think that curators and museums define the art world and define the art, and it really is the artist. The artists tell us and show us what is significant, and our job is just to respond honestly to what the artists are doing. So the idea that sort of came across to us was this notion of information exchange, how information is altered, how information is presented inaccurately, how information can be limited, and how information can be seen in an overabundance. In this age of WikiLeaks, it's kind of interesting that we chose to focus on information.
I asked about the interplay between the two colleagues in making their final selections, and if there were some significant disagreements to resolve.
One would think we'd have that problem, but we didn't have that problem. I think there's maybe only one work that I really had to convince her of. I would say 99% of the time we totally agreed, and we totally were responding to the same works.
I asked Charlie to speak about a couple of pieces that illustrate this theme of information exchange, but that do so in quite different ways.
Well, there's two pieces that really epitomize that in the exhibition. One is by an artist named Kim Rugg, who's a British artist, and the other one is an artist named David Shapiro, who lives in Brooklyn. And I'll start with Kim Rugg's. Basically, what she did is she took 30 front pages of the New York Times, and for each page she deleted information. On the first one, she deleted every word and every image that wasn't an A, the letter A. And the next page, she deleted everything that wasn't the letter B. And the next page, it was letter C. These are the same pages, so the same sort of construct. And then she went all the way to Z. So it was about this sort of public information, about news information that was being altered and obliterated, so we actually didn't know it, and a whole other construct set upon it. The other piece, David Shapiro has a year-long project that he started in 2010, where for each month he makes drawings of every receipt for everything that he spends money on. So from his cable television bill to the cab ride to the receipt from Publix, whatever. And he draws these things with exacting detail, and they're done on basically a long scroll. And the one we have on display is the month of September. And basically it's a piece that's 24 feet long, and we're showing 12 feet of it. The drawings are exacting in their detail. I've even had heated discussions with some people who try to tell me these cannot be drawings, these are Xeroxes. And I keep trying to say, no, I know for a fact. So it's about this personal information and presenting it in a public way, and then it's about this public information in the newspaper that we're not receiving.
Charlie then described one of Kim Rugg's pieces in greater detail.
Well, the Kim Rugg piece, I mean, each page of the New York Times page, let's say it's D, and she's coming up all the letters, she basically cuts thin strips of paper and glues them down line by line over the other letters, and so all that she leaves are that letter. Then she'll do the next letter, and it's basically collaging, but it's basically adding paper to cover up letters, not a part of that section, that page.
I suggested that even as recently as 10 years ago, such artists as Nick Cave, John Bankston, Mickalene Thomas might be more likely seen in an exhibition of African American artists than mainstreamed as they seem to be now, and specifically in this exhibition.
To be perfectly honest, it wasn't until after we got back, when we finally looked at the checklist, we sort of said, well, what's the breakdown? How many women, how many men? So it wasn't a concern of ours. Like culture at large, those sort of barriers or restrictions are really less and less significant. I think we're at a time where artists don't want to be labeled. They don't want to be pigeonholed. That's really the way we approach it. And I mean, honestly, there's the notion of race or sexual orientation or whatever. It really doesn't enter into the conversation in terms of how we make selections.
I asked Charlie how they deal with an audience of greatly varying levels of sophistication.
That is a question that we ask ourselves, and we do think about the audience and think about how they'll respond and how, let's say, aggressive we can get with the types of work. Last summer I did a show that was a video exhibition. It had 3 video artists, and we knew from the get-go, and the show was called Acting Out, we knew that virtually no one would like the exhibition, but I felt that the topic was an important one in terms of introducing video art to the general public in South Florida. Video is really very much a part of contemporary art. We do very little of it. So we did an exhibition. The comment book in the gallery, I would say 75% of the people were just outraged, but there were 25% of the people who thought it was fabulous.
Charlie Stainback went on to suggest that a guest book in the gallery during the time when Mr. Norton was introducing Van Gogh to his audience, that the comments would have been pretty similar.
Basically, we do what we do. We organize exhibitions that are based on what we think is significant. We do not dumb it down, but we do want to make sure that when we do something, that it is understandable. And that's one of the reasons we put the videos, interviews out there, because we didn't have time to do the typical research for an exhibition.
These are brief video interviews by my colleague Jerry Kornbluth that you can find on the norton.org website in the section Past Exhibitions, Now What? We then moved into an adjacent gallery to speak about Stare, a photography exhibition. Charles Stainback is the William and Sarah Ross Soter Curator of Photography. It's an endowed position, and the Soters have also contributed funds for the acquisition of photography.
Yeah, I'm the envy of a lot of my colleagues in the museum field.
In contrast to the current exhibition From A to Z, which derives entirely from the Norton's holdings, Stare did not contain many pieces from the Norton collection.
Until 2 weeks ago, none of it did. This was an exhibition that we borrowed work from a variety of sources. Some of the work right after the show opened, we used various funds that we had at our disposal to acquire works for the collection. The one sort of big component of the exhibition is work by Diane Arbus, and that's from one private collection in Fort Lauderdale. Well, you borrow from collectors, you borrow from other museums, and you borrow from galleries. And one big part of being a curator is having those relationships so you can go to these people.
Regarding the Norton's photography collection,
3,000 is a modest number when you hear numbers of places like the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, with hundreds of thousands when you talk about the International Center of Photography in New York City. But 3,000, it's a really great collection. the Soders have made it possible for me to be here, but also given us funds so we can acquire more things for the collection. And one of my legacies, I hope, is I've done some really great exhibition, but I've also made some great acquisitions.
We then talked about the exhibition Stare, and I asked about the origin of its title.
Well, it's based on a quote by Walker Evans saying, you need to educate your eyes. You need to look really hard. You only live so long. And, for me, I wanted the show to be about photography. And what photography enables us to do is to look very hard, look very carefully. Works in the exhibition range from Diane Arbus and these sort of wonderfully bizarre, freaky, beautiful people to some rather mundane things like photographs of John Copeland's of his feet and his hands. So there's a range of work. There are works that either you turn away from or you can't stop looking at.
A consistent theme is exploring what photographs allow us to see. He went on to explain.
For people of a certain generation, if I say Jack Ruby shoots Lee Harvey Oswald, Dallas, Texas, a lot of us very quickly have that image in our head. We saw the photograph repeatedly, and that image is etched in our minds, and that instant becomes a photograph that we look at intently and stare, and we really sort of analyze, and that's what photography does.
The exhibition includes a particularly unusual set of works of the backs of photographs by Vic Muniz.
Basically, they're collages, they're trompe-l'oeils, and he has recreated with exacting detail what the backs of these photographs look like. He's used aged yellow Scotch tape, stamps, markings, anything you'll find on the back of an old photograph in some old file. We find we don't need to see the picture. We just need to be reminded with the little bits of text and information that's on the back. We actually then see the image in our mind's eye.
Some of Walker Evans and Diane Arbus's work can make us feel rather voyeuristic and are disturbing to many people. I asked if there are some images that are just too troublesome to show.
Well, I only showed the one image by Walker Evans because that's all I needed to show. There is a sort of a high level of voyeurism with Arbus. There are images that she made in nudist colonies that are so matter-of-fact, they're just odd. They're pictures of small people, of transvestites.
He said there's been no negative feedback to this work.
People are responding and understand the importance of the work and understand how it fits into the overall exhibition.
This show featured several, if not numerous, pieces by each of the artists, and Charlie prefers to work this way.
And I've never done an exhibition where I've had 50 different photographers and 50 different works. I just never do that. That's the great thing about museum work, and that's the great thing about this museum, is that they really do allow the curators to make their statement, to sort of say, well, here's what I think is significant, here's what I think we should be thinking about, and the institution supports our desires, and lets us make these things happen.
Well, that's a curator's voice.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
I had noticed that photography is often a part of exhibitions that include work in other mediums, and even in exhibitions from periods that precede photography, rather than exclusively or predominantly in standalone shows.
Even though I can be very charming, I'm also very stubborn. I basically say, we need to have photographs next to paintings. I have been pushing that ever since I got here, and it is having an effect. The director and I do share that. But it's not just the Norton, it's not just me, it's something in terms of the whole museum field, shifting their emphasis from periods, from types of objects, and really making it more interdisciplinary and more holistic.
I asked Charlie about his path to becoming a curator.
I went to art school, and then I got my BFA, and then I went and got my MFA, but during graduate school, I became intrigued with organizing exhibitions, and more as I got into it, I really became intrigued in working with artists and working in museum fields. So I abandoned any notion of being an artist and started working in museums.
Thanks so much, Charlie.
Okay.
This is The Mosaic of Art. I'm George Fishman, and we've just concluded a conversation with Charles Stainback, Curator of Photography at the Norton Museum of Art in West Palm Beach.